Hello, this is Justin at the Tech Train here, and welcome to lesson 13 in this tutorial series looking at how to get started with programming using Small Basic. And before we begin, just a quick shout out to Mehdi Fazal. Thank you very much indeed for your comments and your email. It's always good to hear from people who are going through these videos. So thank you very much for that, and I hope that you and your grandchildren enjoy this lesson and the subsequent ones. So thank you for joining us. So what I want to look at today then is something called string manipulation. Strings, remember, are simply blocks of data that are text, or the computer treats them as though they were just simply text. So things, for example, like your name would be a string. Now, one thing that we can do in Small Basic is to work out how long your name is, how many characters there are in your name. So what we're going to do is create a quick program now. So we'll have the user enter their name, and then we'll get the computer to work out how many letters there are in your name. So let's begin with just a simple text window output. So we'll tell the user what it is that we want them to do. So text window dot write line. Oops, not background color. Let's try that again. Dot write line. There we go. And in brackets and speech marks, what we're going to write are the instructions. So please enter your name. Please enter your name. Close the speech marks, close the brackets. And then we'll have the input. Now, hopefully you can remember from previous lessons what it is we need to store the input in. So if the user is writing something, what is it that we need to then store that in? See if you can remember. And if you said the word variable, well done, that's absolutely right. Now we can call a variable anything we like. It's just simply a named location in the computer's memory. Because we're asking for their name, it makes sense to call our variable name. Now notice that's not in the list here of keywords that Small Basic understands. So that's good. We couldn't call it mouse or math because those, you can see, are keywords that are what we call reserved. We can't use them for variable names because they're already important words in the language. So name is going to equal whatever the user writes in the text window. So if they're writing, we have to do the opposite of that, which is to read. And of course we have to put the open and close brackets at the end of it. Just like write line has an open and close bracket, that's got something in. We can put something in here, but we usually don't. So we'll just simply put it like that. So now when we run the program, we're going to get, if I just open that up, there we go, bring that across into that screen. So we're going to get that information there. I can type in my name, Justin, there we go, program ends. So it's storing the name in the variable, but it's not doing anything with that. So what we want to do now is find out what the length of the name is, what the length of that variable is. How many letters or characters are there in there? So what I'll do is I'll create another variable, and I'll use that variable to store the length, store the number. So let's have, well, name length would be good. So this is another variable that I'm making here. So it's going to equal what? Now, I'll give you a little tip here. When you're creating code that has almost anything to do with strings, to do with writing, or to do with text, almost everything, almost every command is going to need the word text right before it. So if I write the word text and then I put a full stop, you will see that we have a lot of commands now, and all of these, every one of them, are to do with strings or to do with text. Now, not all of this will make sense straight away. Get character code, for example, probably doesn't mean anything just yet, but we will look at that later on in another video. Get subtext, again, we will look at later on in this video. But you can see that we have got get length. So if you can't remember what the exact programming command or word is that you want to use, but you know it's something to do with text or writing, write the word text, then a full stop, and then just scroll up and down and find the one you want. So get length is what we want. And on the right hand side, don't forget, we have this little panel here which reminds us exactly how we need to finish or use this command. So get length, and we can see we've got one thing in brackets there. It's the word text in brackets. And if we look at what it means by text, it's the text whose length is needed. So let's open our brackets. What text is it? What is it we're looking for the length of? Well, we're looking for the length of whatever is stored in the variable name. So get the length of name. Now we're not looking at the length of the word name because that's 4 characters. We're looking at whatever the length of the data stored in the variable called name is. So we've got that answer, but of course at the moment we're not telling the user what that is. So let's do another output. Let's do another text window.writeLine, and in here we'll just simply put the length so as a number. So name length. So what we're doing here is asking for their name, storing it in the variable name. Then in another variable called name length, we're storing the length of the variable name and then outputting that. Let's run that program. And please enter your name. Let's type in Justin, Justin, press enter, and you can see we get the number 6. So there are 6 letters in the name Justin. Let's try that again. There we go, bring that across. Let's type in, please enter your name. Let's type in Mehdi, press enter, and 5 is the answer there. So there are 5 letters in the name Mehdi. Okay, so there we are. We've got the length of a string. Now, that's one thing that we can do, and what I'd like you to do, as I have done throughout these videos, is to give you a chance to just stop for a moment and try that yourself. So if you want to pause the video for a moment and just go away, open up Small Basic, have a go at doing that. Try to do it without looking at my code if you can. If you need to just peek, that's fine. But have a go at writing out the code first of all, test it, see if it works. If it does, fantastic. If it doesn't, then have another little look and make sure you're okay. And then in a second, what I'm going to do is move on and combine getting the length of the text with a selection statement. See if you can remember what that is, and I'll be with you in just a couple of seconds. Okay then, let's have another look at how we do selection. So first of all, can you remember what selection is? We looked at this in episode 8, and there's a key word that we have to use. Not a very big one, quite a short key word to do with making a choice, getting the computer to choose between 2 different options. Can you remember what the word is? Short word? Have you got it? It's the word if. So if is the word we use when we say to the computer, okay, I'm not quite sure which bit of code I want you to run or what I want you to say, so here's the choice. You decide, given all the information, what the best thing to do here is. Now what I want to do with this selection statement is work out whether their first name is bigger than their last name. In other words, is the number of letters in their first name longer than the number of letters in their last name, or is it the same? So that's what I want to try and do, but of course we're not quite ready to do that just yet. So the first thing we need to do is what? Okay, so if you said get their surname, you're absolutely right, because so far we've only got their first name. To be honest, we haven't specifically said your first name, so we could do that, couldn't we, here? Let's just change the instruction so that we say enter your first name. Now, of course, we're storing their first name in a variable called name. What would you think we should store that in if it was their surname? That doesn't make sense, just having one variable called name when we're asking for their first name and then separately for their last name. So let's change the name of this variable. Instead of saying name, let's call it first name. So now we are storing their first name in a variable called first name. So now, of course, we've got this variable, name length. Well, it's not the length of their whole name. Now it's just the length of their first name. So let's change the name of this variable as well to first name length. And of course, that's now finding out the length, not of a variable called name, because that doesn't exist anymore. Now we're looking for the length of the variable called first name. And then of course, we're outputting the length, not of a variable called name length, because that doesn't exist anymore, but now it's first name length. So we've had to change the name of our variables there because of what we're doing with splitting this between looking at the first name and looking at the last name. But it is important to make sure that when you are creating programs, the names of your variables make sense. They've got to be clear. Otherwise, it gets hopeless later on. Yes, you could call the first name variable A and the last name variable B, but it gets very difficult later on working out which variable is supposed to be doing what. And if you have a bug in your program, which you will from time to time, it gets horrible trying to work out where the problem is if your variables are all badly named. Now, of course, having created this, what we can do is copy all of those 4 lines, paste them down here, and now we can do pretty much the same thing, but this time with their last name. So we'll change each of these lines. Please enter your last name. Then, of course, this variable needs to be called last name. This variable here needs to be last name length. We are finding the length of last name, and we're outputting the information about the last name length. So now we have, how many variables do we have? See if you can quickly think off the top of your head. How many variables have we got so far? Okay, we actually have 4 variables so far, don't we? We have first name length, last name, and last name length. So there we are, 4 variable names, 4 sensible names. And if we were to, I'm going to comment out that line. The comment there, I just put a little apostrophe at the beginning of it, which means that the computer is going to ignore that because, of course, this isn't written in code yet. That's just simply a little note for what I want to try and do later. Let's just run the program now so we can see how this is working. So please enter your first name. So I'll enter in Justin. And you can see that that's 6 letters in my first name. Please enter your last name, Arnold. And there are 6 letters in my last name as well. So not much difference there. But if you create this program yourself and try that, you can see how quite possibly your names will have different number of characters in it. And if it doesn't, then try somebody else's or make up a name. It doesn't really matter. So that so far got both of those names inputted, stored, and we've worked out what the length is. But I want to use this if statement down here to work out whether the first name is bigger than the last name or whether the first name is the same length as the last name. So here we've sort of written out this just in ordinary English, and that's fine. If you're creating programs, sometimes it's helpful to just write out what you want to try and do in an ordinary sentence and then convert that or translate that into code. So we're looking for if first name. All right, so what are we going to put in here? Well, it's not just the words first name. It is the variable that contains the length of the first name, which is, of course, this one here, first name length. So let's change this to if first name. And you'll see that now we've created these variables. As we start to type them out, Small Basic is including them in its code word or programming words. So you don't have to type out the whole variable name if you can see it listed here. And that's another reason, of course, why it makes sense to have sensible variable names, because now you can recognize this really easily. So if first name length is bigger than, now we can't write out the words is bigger than, so if you think back to, I think we looked at this in number 4, I think it was possibly, where you've got a symbol that means the same as is bigger than. So can you remember what the symbol is for is bigger than? Well, if you thought about the symbol that is 2 keys after the letter M on your keyboard, which would be that one, well done. So if first name length is bigger than, and here of course last name, well, that will be the last name length. There it is here. So if first name length is bigger than last name length, then what do we do? So remember that we always have to have the word then at the end of a line that has if at the beginning. So if and then are like bookmarks. They have to be at each end of one of these question or selection statements. So what do? Well, if it's bigger than that, we're simply going to tell the user that their first name is longer. So let's do a text window dot writeLine. And we'll put in here, your first name is longer. There we go. Now, of course, it might be that the first name is not longer than the last name. There are two possible alternatives here. So if the first name isn't bigger than the last name, then either it is smaller or it is the same length. So we need to work out which of those two options is right. So if I do else if here, which is the way of saying, okay, we've asked the first question, that might be right. Here's another option. So else if the first name length is, let's say it is equal to, or no, let's keep this simple. You could do it either way, it doesn't really matter. Let's keep this consistent. So I'm going to say is less than. That's the opposite symbol here. So if the first name length is less than the last name length, don't forget at the end of any line of code that has an if or an else if at the beginning, we must have that word then. Then what? Well, if first name is smaller than last name, we can say that. I'm just going to copy this line of code here. Don't have to write it out every single time. Copy and paste is your friend. So here we can simply say your last name is longer. Now, of course, there are three options. So we can say if the first name is bigger, do this. Otherwise, if the first name is smaller, do this one. But there is, of course, one more option, else. We don't need to ask else if, because there is only one more option. And that, of course, is that the first name is the same length as the last name. So here I'm going to write out, let's do the copy and paste again here. Your first name is the same length as your last name. There we go. Just close the speech marks and close the brackets like that. There we go. I'll just make that window a little bit wider so you can see all of the code. I'll zoom out slightly as well. Don't forget, if you need to zoom in and out, then hold down the control key at the bottom left of your keyboard and then use the wheel on your mouse. That tip works in almost every single program, so handy one that. Now, with an if block or selection statement here, which we looked at in lesson 8, so if you're a little bit hesitant about that, go back, have a look at lesson 8. But with if, we've got to always have then at the end of the line, but at the end of the whole question, we've got to have what? How do we finish an if block, or how do we end an if block? If you said end if, yeah, absolutely right. There we go. So let's run this program now then. Let's click run or F5, and I'm not going to type in mine. Well, I will, because we know my first and last name is the same. So let's type in Justin for my first one, Arnold for the last one. Your first name is the same length as your last name. There we go. Let's try it again though, but this time I'll use different names. So let's say, please enter your first name, and I'll say Bob. Oops, don't know what that symbol was. Bob. What I do is I call it a carrot, but it was totally useless. And your last name, let's type in Simpson. There we go. So your last name is longer. There we go. So what I'm going to do now is give you another chance to just pause the video and have a go at this yourself. But I want to give you a couple of challenges. So first of all, when in a second you pause the video, have a go at just extending the program you wrote the first time so that you're asking both for the first name and for the last name, and then you're outputting a message that tells them which of their names is longer. So that's the first thing to do. Have a go at doing that. Again, if you don't get it right, come back and have a little look at the code and then resume the video. But it's better to have a go at writing the code and make mistakes and find out that it's gone wrong at the end. You kind of knew it probably would. You were just guessing there. But have a go and then come back, and then you can see the difference between my code and your code. That's probably a better way of working. But here's some other suggestions for you as well. So rather than saying your first name is longer, see if you can do a little bit of maths, which we looked at in lesson 4. See if you can do some maths that will work out how much longer the first name is than their last name. Or in this case, how much longer the last name is than their first name. So for this, you'll need to do two things. You'll need to do some simple maths. So again, look back at lesson 4 if you're not sure about that. And you will also need to do some concatenation, which is what we looked at in lesson 3, where we're joining together strings. So that you'll output something that says something along the lines of, your first name is 3 letters longer than your last name. So that's your big challenge. I'm not going to write that program. I'm not going to go through it anyway with you. If you get really stuck, then obviously you can leave a message below. Just simply leave a comment under this video or send me an email. Mehdi, as I said, did both, and that's fine. So I will be I'll try and offer as much help as I can if you do get stuck, but I'm sure you'll be absolutely fine if you have a look back at those earlier videos. So if you want to pause the video in just a second and have a go at doing that, and when you come back, what we're going to have a look at is how to reverse a string. In other words, how to write their name backwards. So as soon as you're ready, I'll see you in just a couple of seconds. Okay then, I hope you got on all right with that. Let's have a go now at looking at how to reverse a string. So how to take text and swap it around to the last letters at the beginning letters at the end. Oh, you know what reverse means. Right, I'm going to get rid of pretty much all of this program here, so all of that's gone. So I'm left with these first 4 lines. In fact, I'm going to get rid of the 4th line as well. So all I have now here is my instruction. I'm storing some data that the user enters into a variable, and then I'm finding out the length of that variable. Now we're still asking for first name. I'm not going to worry too much about being a name. I'll just say, please enter a word. It could be a word, it could be text, doesn't really matter. Now because it could be a, let's just say word, rather than storing that in a variable called first name, we'll change this variable so it's just simply word. So word is whatever they typed in, and then we'll have the word length is the variable that we're storing the length in. So word length equals text.getLength of the variable word. Now we're not outputting that just yet because we don't need to output. This program now is not telling the user how long their word is, it's reversing it. But of course, to reverse it, we need to know what the length is. Let's just say that it was the word jellyfish. So let's just write out the word jellyfish there. So if we were to reverse the word jellyfish, what we would probably do is have a look at the last letter. So we'd start at the end and say, okay, it's an H. Let's put an H down. Then we'd say, right, now counting backwards, the one before that is an S, put that one down. Then counting backwards, it's an I, put that one down, and then an F, and so on. So we would simply start at the end and count backwards. I say count though, but we probably wouldn't actually count. We'd stick our finger or a pencil or something over the letter. But the problem is that computers don't have fingers and they're really bad at holding pencils. So instead, what the computer has to do is count. So it has to first of all work out what position that letter is in. Now, if it knows the length of the text, it can work out what that position is. So in this case, counting from the J, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So it needs to start at the number 9 or position 9 in this string and then write that letter out. So it writes out the letter at position 9, then counting backwards it says right, now I'm down to position 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Okay, that's an S, put that down. Right, now I'm going to go from 8 down to 7. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, that's position 7, there's the I. Okay, again, take 1 away from 7, that gives me 6. Let's count to position 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, that's the F, and so on. So the computer needs to have a way of counting down from however long this text is, so in this case 9, so counting down from 9 all the way down to 1. So we need a counting system that counts backwards. Now, if you remember lesson 6, we looked at something called loops. And you can create a loop that counts up. So for example, we might have for I equals 1 to 10. And that's a loop that will count 10 times. And the variable I will start off as a 1, then I will become a 2, then I will become a 3, all the way up to 10. And when I is containing the number 10, the loop finishes. But what if we want to count backwards? Well, we could simply say for I equals 10 to 1. For us humans, that seems pretty logical. You use common sense and think, well, if you're counting from 10 to 1, that must mean you're counting backwards. However, you're using something there that computers don't have. As well as not having fingers, they also don't have what you just used there, and that's common sense. A computer will look at that and say, well, if I'm counting from 10 to 1, I've finished already, because 10 is bigger than 1. That's its logic. So we have to tell the computer, no, you're not going to stop when you get to the biggest number. You're going to be counting in steps of -1. So you're going to start at 10, and then you're going to step down 1. You're going to go -1 from that, and then you're going to keep on minusing 1 until you get to 1. So that's how we can create a loop which will count backwards. In this case, this will go 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then stop because it's got to 1. However, we're not counting from 10 because, well, we saw the word jellyfish had 9 characters, so that'd be no good. What we're looking for here, of course, is the word length. So if I type in the word jellyfish, well, word length is going to store the number 9, so our loop is going to go from 9 to 1. If I was to type in the word fish, well, word length is now going to store the number 4, so my loop will be counting from 4 to 1. So in this way, we are going to be counting down from whatever the last position is to the first position. Now what I'm going to do is use text window dot, but I'm going to do right rather than right line. If you remember, right line puts a new line after everything you put. And here we don't want to do that. We want to put one letter, then another letter, then another letter, but all on the same line. We don't want to press enter at any point. So I'm going to do text window dot write. What is it we are writing? We're going to get what we call subtext. Now, subtext is simply pulling out part of some text. So we're pulling out a letter or letters from some text. Now remember what I said earlier on. If you're ever doing any programming in Small Basic that is to do with words or strings or text, and you're not sure what the word's going to be, write the word text and put a dot. And let's have a look through some of these instructions. Let's say we're looking for subtext, and oh, would you believe it? There we are. Get subtext. Gets some subtext, pulls out some text from the text you're looking at. There we are, that's the one we want. So we're going to get the subtext, and you can see on the right here we've got quite a lot of what we call parameters, so bits of information. 3 of them in fact. The text that we're getting the information from, where we start, and how much of it we want. So in this case, we're getting the subtext. We're looking in the original word. We're looking in that word there. So we're looking in the word that we were given. What position are we starting at? What position are we looking at? Well, it's whatever position we're up to now. Word length. Remember, that's going to be, let's say we had jellyfish again, it's going to be a 9, then it's going to be an 8, then it's going to be a 7, and so on. So we're looking at position, well, whatever we're up to here. So it's going to be I. So it's position I, because I will start off as 9, then 8, then 7, then 6, and so forth. So we're going to be position I, that's our variable counter. And we only want one letter at a time. So how long? Just one character. So I'm going to press bracket there to close those brackets, and I'm going to press bracket again to close the brackets here. Remember, when you're coding, it's sometimes very easy to forget how many brackets you've opened or how many speech marks you've opened. So close both of those there and press enter. And that's it. That's all we really need in our loop. So I'm going to end my loop by typing end 4. And let's run the program. So bring that over here, and let's use the word jellyfish that I heard earlier on. Please enter a word. So I'm going to write the word jellyfish. And there you go. So what we've got is the word jellyfish there, as you can see, on one word. Because I used text window.write, it hasn't pressed enter at any point. So even this press any key to continue is on the same line. Doesn't matter, we can fix that easily enough. But you can see that there it's written the word jellyfish backwards. So if I wanted to put a new line at the end of it, then what I can do is just simply, after my loop, do a text window dot write line, which is the one that will press enter, and we won't have to put anything in it. So I'm going to have speech mark to show blank, nothing there. And if I run it now, let's type another word in here. So let's have the word banana. There we are. Never quite sure when to stop doing the ANs there, but there we are, banana. And we have the word banana then written on its own line. So that's how to reverse a string. A little bit tricky because we've got to combine there not only using the text manipulation or string manipulation to get the length of a string, but now we're also using that length to create a reversed loop there. So what I'm going to do is, again, give you a chance to pause, go and have a go at doing that yourself, see if you can create that program yourself. If you need to come back and have another look just to check where you're up to, that's fine, but try and do as much as you can without looking at the code. As I say, even if you know you're going to get a line wrong, doesn't matter. Nothing's going to break, nothing's going to blow up or anything. Have a go at writing it out without looking at my code. And then when you do it, if it works, brilliant. You will feel fantastic if you did it without looking at my code. If it didn't work, don't worry, have a look at my code, see where the difference is, and you'll probably find that the vast majority of it you got right. There's one thing you got wrong, perhaps, and then you'll remember that next time more easily. And that's how you'll make more progress. So what I'm going to do is give you a chance to do that now, and then we're going to do one more thing, I think, in this. Well, the chatbot I mentioned earlier on, I think we'll do in a future video, just because that's a little bit more complex. So what I want to do for the final part in this video is to create a palindrome checker. So we're already reversing a string here, but what I want to do is then have the computer check to see whether the word you entered is a palindrome. Now, if you're not sure what a palindrome is, don't worry. Have a go at doing this little challenge first of all. I'll be right here in a couple of seconds to explain what a palindrome is and how we create a palindrome checker. So when you're ready, I'll see you in a minute. All right then, I hope you had success with that. Let's carry on. So what I want to do now is to create a palindrome checker. What is a palindrome? P-A-L-N, there we are, palindrome, which ironically is not a palindrome. It simply means a word which, when spelt backwards, is exactly the same. Give you a couple of examples. Take the word level. If we write that backwards, starting from the end, we get level. Let's try another one. Let's type the word radar. Type that one backwards and you get radar. So a palindrome is simply a word that is the same forwards as backwards. So you can get some quite long sentences that do work out that way. Now, in order to be able to create a palindrome checker, we need to be able to compare two variables or two strings. We need to look at the original word that the person entered, which of course is stored in Word, but we need to compare that with the reversed version. And we can't, because we're not storing the reversed version. The reversed version. I think my mind is working backwards now. We can't compare Word with something which isn't stored anywhere. That's just simply displayed on the screen. So what we need to do is, instead of writing the reversed string one character at a time on the string, we need to add one character at a time to a new variable so that we do have a separate variable that stores the reversed version. So what I'm going to do up here, just before my loop, is I'm going to create a new variable. We'll have rev word for reversed word. And I want to make sure to begin with it's blank. So I'm just going to say equals and then those double speech marks. So that's now a new variable and it's completely empty. In this line here, I'm going to rewrite this line out completely. So in this one, what I want to do is simply to say that the reversed word variable, and don't forget, this is something we're going to be doing multiple times. This is inside the loop. So we're counting from 9 to 1 or whatever it might be. So the reversed word variable is going to equal whatever it is now, because at some point during this loop it will have some letters in it. We don't want to get rid of them. So it's going to equal whatever it is now plus, there's our concatenation, plus the next character. So that's of course going to be the text.get substring. Yeah, get the subtext. And what is it we're looking in? We're looking at the word variable. We're looking at position I, our variable counter here, and we only want one character, so we'll just put a 1 in there. Close our brackets. Only one bracket to close here, because actually this is slightly simpler, this line of code here. And then just to prove how this works, what I'm going to do now is just do a quick text window .writeLine and just simply put in rev word in there. So if I was to run this program now, drag that onto the screen, please enter a word. Let's have teacup. Okay, so there we are. We've got the word teacup reversed, and that's now in a variable. So we haven't written that one letter at a time onto the screen. That is actually stored in a variable. So what we can do now is compare those two versions. So we have the original word stored in Word, and we have the backwards version of it stored in rev word. So we need to know whether those are the same. So we need a selection statement. We need a question. So again, we're going to use our old friend if. So if the word they entered originally is equal to the rev word, in other words, they're the same, then what do? Well, we tell them that it's a palindrome. Let's do a text window .writeLine. And we'll put some concatenation in here while we're doing it. So we'll simply say that their word, then we'll add to that, we'll concatenate to that some words. So their word is a palindrome, There we go, close speech marks, close the brackets. And of course, if word is not equal to rev word, what do? Well, else. So if it's not, then we'll simply copy that line of code, pop it down here, and say that word is not a palindrome. There we go. And whenever we are using selection, whenever we have any of these blue words basically, so a loop that begins with for, a selection block that begins with if, anything that has these blue words in it, we must always end them. So we're going to end our if block there. Because of course there are only two possible options. It either is or it isn't. Let's run this now and do a couple of tests. So let's start off with the word banana, which I know is not a palindrome. There we are. Banana is not a palindrome. Let's run it again, and let's put one that is a palindrome. So let's put in the word radar. Radar is a palindrome, as we saw earlier on. Let's try it again. So let's have the word repaper. And look, repaper is a palindrome. So there we are, we have a palindrome checker. So there we're using a couple of different string manipulation methods. So we're getting the length of a string and we're getting subtext from a string, as well as using a reversed loop, selection, and concatenation. So there's quite a lot of different coding skills involved in that little program there. So at this point, I'm going to end the video. So first thing I'd like you to do, again, is, as you have done throughout, have a little go at doing that program yourself, see what words you can find, which are palindromes. And then when you've done that, the next video that I'm going to look at, which I think will be up next week, will be taking this idea of get subtext and using that to create a simple but nonetheless quite convincing chatbot. I've done this in classes, in lessons with classes, and I've always begun by not telling the class that it was a chatbot, and I simply write to the computer, and apparently it understands me, and it can be quite scary if you don't realize what's going on. So we'll make it look as though the computer understands you. And if you have family there or friends who don't know about programming and you do something like this, say a chatbot, you can really scare them. You can make it very personal and it will freak them out, which is always good fun. So I hope you enjoyed that. If you have any questions or comments, do leave them below. If you liked the video, don't forget to click the like button. That makes a difference. And of course, make sure that you're subscribed so that when the next video goes live, you will know that it has gone live, and click the notification bell, and that way you'll get a little knock on the door, a virtual knock on the door that says, hey, this video is up. Don't forget to get your weekly dose of programming. So there we are. Thank you very much indeed for watching. I look forward to seeing you in a future video. Bye for now.